Good morning. I would love to know, we've got a couple of people in line with us this morning. If you can hear us, say, Lynn, thank you for joining us. Oh, great. Thank you so much for responding. It's so nice to see you this morning. I'm sure we've got a number of people who have signed up to join us this morning, and obviously it's Saturday morning, so we may not be quite yet awake. So we hope that you're feeling nice and fresh. Clem, I don't think we can see you.
Can you hear me? I'm trying to start the video, but it's saying that you need to allow my video to start.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why that is happening. We will get this happening really soon. That is a great question as to why that's happening right now. Clem, can you request a...
It says I can't, you can't start your video because the host has stopped it.
How fun. How fun indeed. And yet, aha, maybe here. Make host. All right, I'll make you the host.
Oh, great.
Let's see if that helps.
Yay!
Good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. Now, what I'm going to do is, actually, Clem, can you please hit the live to YouTube button? Oh, actually, no, I'm going to have to be that. You're going to have to bring it back to me being the host because otherwise I can't share my screen.
How do I do that?
On the right-hand side where it says panelists.
Whereabouts, sorry?
On the right-hand side, you should have a list of attendees and panelists. Oh, don't worry. I think I've... No.
Yeah. All right, I'm making you host.
Great. Excellent. Now I can share my screen with everyone and we can actually get started for Breakthrough Resistance to Change. So first of all, I'd like to thank Clementine for coming on this morning. She's hanging out at home and I'm obviously in the clinic. And, you know, maybe I'll talk about myself a little bit and Clem can talk about why she's here as well, wanting to talk to you about breaking through resistance to change and about how come adaptation is a really important part of the process for what's happening for people at the moment. So I have a background in clinical education, and so I've been teaching to other osteopaths and other health professionals since around 2011, and I found it a really fantastic part of being a health professional, and part of the reason for that is that you get to experience that moment that you're having a greater impact with people. And that if you're supporting other practitioners in their development and their clinical practice, then you have maybe greater capacity to influence what's happening with more people in the community. And, you know, that really fits into our values as to why we do what we do, because we want to support people in the community to have better health. And what I started to realize is that there was really no reason why we couldn't offer some patient education and really focusing more on implementation as opposed to the science, just to our general community. And so what we want to do is really take people on a journey to develop lifelong habits, because we know that this is what gives people better long-term outcomes, rather than having a short-term goal, maybe or maybe not meeting that goal, and then just going back to the things that we do before. In the community, chronic health conditions are on the rise. And a lot, not absolutely all of them, all of the time, but a lot of people who develop chronic disease, if you think about the types of things that we're talking about, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, or even some things like stress and anxiety, for a lot of people with a change of lifestyle, that you can have a massive impact and potentially even go out of that state that you're in and no longer require medication and those sorts of things. So not everyone can achieve that. However, there are lots of people that can achieve that. And obviously we want to prevent people going down that pathway to start with. And when that pathway has started, we want to reduce the impact of what those chronic conditions are going to do to our bodies. And so the way that we want to do this is by supporting and nurturing our well-being, and predominantly we use a natural and holistic approach. Now, Clem, maybe it'd be great if you could join us and tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. So I'm probably going to go a little bit more vulnerable than you, but I've been practicing for 5 years as an osteopath, and mainly in Australia and New Zealand, and have recently moved to Melbourne and joined the Koru team. So real pleasure to be working with Prue and learning as a practitioner. I suppose my journey, I like that word that you use, Prue, has been around learning about myself and how that applies to my patients. And it's been a real journey of self-discovery for me. So dealing with anxiety, sometimes some depression, and low self-worth, which I'm sure a lot of people out there can relate to. For me, the journey of health in the broader sense has been about understanding how I work in myself. And for me, that's really been around tapping into some awareness between the relationship of my physical body and my emotional body. So yeah, that's really where I come from as a practitioner, is that I value sort of the mind-body connection, and how that connection can support the healing process. So yeah, I think that's why I'm really happy to be here and be talking about this.
Yeah, and I thank you so much for sharing, Clem. And I do think it's really incredibly valuable for people to know that we're real people too.
Absolutely.
That, you know, we've had our own struggles, and part of my journey to actually become an osteopath, which I was already really interested in healthcare and didn't really imagine that I was going to go down any other different path. But when I was a teenager, I got glandular fever, which then led into developing chronic fatigue syndrome.
I didn't know that.
There you go. And so I actually spent nearly 12 months off school, from between halfway through year 9 to halfway through year 10. And at one stage, I was sleeping up to 20 hours a day. And that in order to change my life around really dramatically, you know, it was that some significant changes needed to happen to my lifestyle. And so as well as it was really, really incredibly difficult at the time, not just for myself, but for my family, it really forced, to a certain extent, me to, and you know, my family to make really significant changes to how we lived. And that, you know, at one stage, my mum was walking around the house banging a saucepan with a wooden spoon to keep me awake during the day while sitting on the couch.
Wow.
My exercise used to be 1 minute to walk for 1 minute outside. And I got to build up by a minute every 2 days when we started implementing how it was that I was going to be able to regain my ability to re-enter into the normal world. And habits, you know, were a significant part of that. And that for me now, taking care of myself, my body, my soul, it's non-negotiable. It has to be, because I never want to go there again. But it is an active choice, and I choose that on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I just wanted to say before we move on that if anyone has any questions, they can just write in the chat box or the Q&A chat box, and I'll be monitoring those throughout the webinar so we can answer them directly.
Thank you, Clem. So what we'll make available for you today, if there's anything that you would like to review following the webinar, we're more than happy to give you a copy of our presentation notes, and we will make a separate PDF document that just has some key highlight features of what we've covered today. We will also give you the recordings of some exercises that we have done. Now, 2 of them we're actually going to do live. Clem, thank you, has made for us, so we're going to follow during the course of the presentation, and but we'll make that available to you as well. So we've popped it on YouTube, so we'll send you a link. And we want you to know that there's ongoing support. Okay, we are here for you. You know how to, hopefully you know how to find us. But you know, we are committed to caring for our community for the long term. We want you to know that you're in the right place. And so, you know, if you are having difficulty with having internal resistance to change, firstly, you're not alone. You know, I think, Clem, would you say this as well, that this is what we've been seeing in clinic?
Absolutely. I mean, I have to just share my own experience of the last week because we've been back treating for the last month or so now. But because I live in Darebin area, we made the decision to keep me at home and for me to not come into clinic on the Tuesday. So it's been back to this sort of weird isolation, you know, having to check in with myself every day or every hour in terms of what I feel is right to do and what I feel is not right to do. And, you know, I think I sort of thought that was all over and then have to go back into it. It's been quite a bit of, just a bit of an upheaval. And, you know, I went and got tested yesterday and now I'm all of a sudden stuck with my husband at home. So it just all feels quite drastic change in the last 4 days. But, so I think we're all feeling it, you know, and I think there's definitely comfort in knowing that weird agitation that you're aware of every day is a sign of our times, and that it's okay, and that all we need to do is our best.
Absolutely. And one of our focuses is that we don't want to just necessarily focus on what I have to do today and it being potentially frustrating or stressful, but that we can make some choices. This is a very unique opportunity where we all have to make some change. I don't think I've met anyone who hasn't had to change anything yet. And so we can have, I do think that this is an incredible time to consider how do we want to live moving forward. And that we have some there's some changes right now that we're gonna have to integrate into a normal part of our daily living. But at the same time, we have the opportunity to maybe reevaluate our lifestyle, the relationships that we have with our family, how we communicate with people, and do things differently. And some really positive things can potentially come out of this incredibly unusual time. And that part of that is that we want to sort of avoid this sort of up and down. We want to try and create a little bit of stability and a little bit of consistency with what we do that's going to provide our own internal support system for the longer term. So we're going to give you as much as we can for the next about an hour. And so what we're going to talk about is something called change fatigue. And I think a lot of you might be experiencing this right now. I'm not going to speak for you, but if those words resonate, you might be experiencing it. We're going to talk about some of what we would consider to be the 5 keys of sustainable well-being. So the different portions of your life that can be worth, reflecting on and having a little bit of consideration for. And then we're going to go through 3 different types of different implementation exercises that you can continue on with to use at home each day if you like. You can use more than one of them if you would like to do so. And what we know is that there is scientific support that it reduces stress levels and helps people to feel better. And that's, a huge amount of what we're about. And we'll talk a little bit about habits versus motivation and willpower. Now, do we have a question? I think I saw something flash up on my screen, Clem.
Faye's just relating to change fatigue.
Yes, thank you, Faye.
It's nice when we can name it, right? It's like, that's what I've been feeling.
Sometimes it's hard to find the words.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things that is worth recognizing is that change is always happening every day. Internally, our body is always changing. We're getting rid of cells, we're getting new ones. We have temperature fluctuations, partly through each day, and the day-night cycle, it's a change. We have the seasons, which is a change, but it's associated with that, there are natural rhythms within that process. But change can happen because of a crisis or what I would call as natural evolution, but change is a constant. Nothing ever stays the same. So learning to be resilient and being able to adapt to change is going to be an ongoing useful tool. Now, one of the things that we know is that when people get stressed, now there's different types of stress, but when we experience, let's say, an acute stress, so we talk about running away from the tiger, that these types of events typically should be short-lasting, and we have natural, normal, internal body responses that should help to support us, and they should be instantaneous. Our body should be able to adapt, in a second. It should be able to increase our heart rate, change our breathing rate, alter our digestion, change our thinking processes, really snap of a finger, right? Because it's going to save our life. However, if our stress level is chronic or constant, what can start to happen is that our body's natural, normal processes on the inside start to fatigue as a part of this process, because we're not designed to not rest. We're not designed for our heart rate or our blood pressure to be high all the time. We're not designed for our nervous system, our sympathetic nervous system, being tense and tight all the time. That's not what we were designed to do. But what we're starting to see is more and more, particularly at the moment, is that people's bodies are in what we would describe as the fight-flight response. Would you like to talk to that a bit more, Clem?
I've just had Yvette bring up something that maybe it would be worthwhile touching on. Yvette said, I have ASD and ADHD, so change is hard in everyday things. It causes internal and sometimes external distress. At 41, I'm still working on how to work through it. So, I mean, I'd like to just say thanks for sharing, Yvette. It already sounds like you're doing really great. And I suppose maybe you'll have something to add, Prue, but are there certain things that you know at 41 now that give you a sense of calm and centeredness that you know you can rely on? And whether that's naming, you know, a few things in the room like chair, table, water bottle, or is it by looking at a photo of your children or your family, or is it by taking a deep breath? Are there things that you know give you a sense of calm in those moments of distress? Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So Yvette just said taking deep breaths and pausing. So, I mean, that sounds like you're already doing amazingly. So
Absolutely.
do you have anything else to add, Prue?
I think it's that thing where it's good to know what tools already work for us. And sometimes if we're starting to feel a sense of overwhelm, sometimes we need to be open to trying a different tool that could support us. We might not find the right thing the first time that meets our needs at that specific moment. But you know, certainly if we are open to trying some new things that can be really supportive and nurturing to our system, that will help us to self-stabilize.
Yeah, and Yvette just added, I know that the moment will pass and the next one will come, which is also, that's a tricky one to just trust that you know, fuzz or that distress will eventually pass. But again, that's also a constant, right? Is that it's never straightforward. It'll be an up and a down, and the down will be followed by an up. Yeah.
And that we know that coronavirus, this time will end. It will end. It inevitably, it will end, and a new cycle will come. The uncertainty and some of the fear comes from the fact that we don't know when that's going to be.
Faye's got another question for us. She's asking, how do we avoid taking on other people's stress when we work closely with them?
Actually, I think one of the tools that we're going to use in the implementation exercises will be helpful for that. So I'd love your feedback, Faye, you know, once we've moved through a little bit more, to see if it's something that you think you'll be able to implement for you. Okay, so I think we'll keep moving through for now. So really, this change by choice helps to build our internal power or our resilience, and this allows us to be responsive rather than reactionary. So it's like, are we conscious and able to sit with whatever is happening right now, or are we having this split moment reaction that really isn't coming from our true conscious self? So what is change fatigue? So there's a lot of research around this in what's called organizational psychology. And what they see is if, let's say, a workplace puts in too many changes or a lot of changes in a short period of time, people start to get stressed. They start to get a sense of this overwhelm. I don't know how I'm going to do all these things. There's too many changes. And then with that, there's can become a sense of, I really don't know about this. What other words might people use with that? Kind of growing indifference. They sort of start to not kind of care, maybe, is or put in, or have that same level of ownership or effort, or so they start to become a bit of resigned to the fact that, well, I don't really care that much, and maybe I'm just going to do my own thing, or because there's some struggle with that, and so people get this emotional, mental, and physical fatigue. And again, it's a little bit like that tiger situation. Our perception, our body doesn't actually know the difference necessarily from an internal perspective about what different types of stress are. So we start having body responses to things that probably shouldn't be giving us that necessarily the same, it's not necessarily a personal threat to our well-being at that particular very moment, but our body has difficulty recognizing the difference. So we start to get really exhausted. Do we have some more comments?
Not for the moment. You're good to go.
Great. Is there anything you'd like to add to
them? No, I think you've covered it. I mean, just that sense of distancing as well, like disinterest is maybe one. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but certainly I'm observing in the community that, I can start to see this pattern. Initially, people were really stressed about the pandemic. We saw panic buying. People were getting overwhelmed and very reactionary. And then people started to go, well, does it really matter anyway? And I don't care. I'm just going to go and do my own thing. And people were coming in, people can be different stages of different processes, but people were coming in incredibly exhausted, and then we were starting to see the physical effects of this elevated stress response in our patients. What sort of things were you seeing with your patient baseline?
I think the main ones have really been headaches. Like that has really increased in the last month or so. But generally just, a sense of restlessness, not sleeping very well, maybe sort of a lack of a purpose or lack of motivation, certainly. Some jaw issues, jaw clenching has been a big one as well. Just all things that we know relate to stress and to an increased sympathetic nervous system.
Definitely.
Yeah. What about you?
I was seeing a lot of muscle spasm and physical muscle tightness, and probably in association with that, I would have to go over and look at our patient data, but I'm pretty sure I'm seeing more nerve impingement than I normally would as well, on top of the headaches. And also stomach cramps, sleep, people not sleeping well.
Yeah.
People talking about brain fog and concentration problems. There's, chat to us in the chat box. Have you been experiencing more or these different things in your own body? And what we would talk about is that there are sort of 5 main areas that we would consider to be particularly relevant in regards to how people are, how can people improve their well-being and their sense of stability and their long-term health. And so I think nutrition is a fairly obvious one in the sense that we know what we eat has an effect on our well-being. It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone nurtures themselves through food in a positive way all the time. We know that, for example, even just under normal conditions, that 4 out of 5 Australians don't eat enough fruit and vegetables, just as a base foundation. So we know that's an area that people need more support and more help. Then we think about movement. How much do we need to move in a day in order to be healthy? And there are specific Australian guidelines in regards to movement that are going to sustain us in the long term. And we know that the vast majority of adults in Australia are not meeting the lowest end of those needs in order to sustain themselves in the long term. We also have body awareness. And the way that I would describe this partly is being able to internally gauge at any moment, how do I feel? Now that could be on an emotional level, it could be on a physical level, and we don't necessarily have to be incredibly body aware all the time. There's lots of things happening internally that are happening on the subconscious level, and that's okay. If we could notice every single heartbeat that we ever had, if we noticed every digestive movement that we ever had, then we probably wouldn't be able to engage well in the outside world. However, that doesn't mean that we should be disengaged from our body's sensation, and that often my feeling is that people, when they're starting to undergo stress processes and they're starting to get physical responses in their bodies, that we have this maybe sometimes a little bit of a disconnect between our bodies, our body messaging system is trying to say to us, hey, maybe check in with me, I'm struggling, maybe we need to adopt some things that are going to support my physical body at this particular time. And then maybe sometimes if we're not reading those signals early, then it starts to get louder. And so we go from tightness to spasm, or we go from neck tension to headache, and then to migraine, and then with the aura and the dizziness and all the other things that come along with that. So we sort of start to get this, if we're not paying attention and we're not listening, then our body will start to increase those signals of information, which I would describe as a way of kind of, really making us pay attention. We also have mindset, particularly in the business world. People talk about mindset a lot, and that, they might talk about, well, you either have a growth mindset or I don't think of the word that they use for it, but a negative mindset. And I don't necessarily think it's that simple. But what we do know is that our mind is incredibly powerful, and changes in our perception or how maybe we choose to filter information can have an impact on our long-term well-being, and that there are tools that can support people towards a mindset that is going to be more healthy for the long term. And then we have relationships. And so part of that can be our relationship with ourself, those messages, that little bit of self-talk going on in the background. Our relationship with ourself is just as important in our long-term health as I would think and say as what we put in our mouth. So if you're giving yourself negative feedback all the time, if you're not your own best friend, and if you would never speak to someone in those words, someone you love, then sometimes we should be developing some tools of how we relate and speak to ourselves. because we can be our own biggest critic. And I can honestly say that I am at times, I do this. So I understand what it's like, but it's also meant that I've practiced a lot of tools in order to help me be able to break what is a habit and create a new habit. So if I can do it, I'm very confident that it's something that you can learn as well. Now, relationships obviously is also then our relationship with the people around us, and the relationship with our environment can be for some people really incredibly important, or with people or pets, the different aspects of people's lives. And it's not just us talking about health as being this sort of holistic thing. Even the World Health Organization recognizes it, and what they've described is that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So what this tells us, sometimes people think, well, I'm not in pain, so therefore everything's fine. And that sometimes we don't recognize that we could feel better than we currently do. Clem, I'd love for you to join in.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it makes me think of that sort of biopsychosocial approach that I like to take with patients, that, with every thought, and this maybe goes back to what you were saying about relationship with yourself, with every thought, there is associated an emotion as well as a belief.
Yes.
And that when we talk about mental and physical and social well-being, it's also about looking at the interaction between those three things. So thoughts, emotions, and beliefs that always come together and often drive an unconscious action, which might be emotional eating, or it might be, just avoiding responsibility or avoiding exercise, or finding, every excuse to not do the things that we know would actually resonate with our values if we took time to reflect on those values and actually really connect with what they mean to us. I think that
Absolutely. And I can say that probably the thing that we hear so often is that I don't have time. And the irony of that is that if we don't take care of our body, we have a shorter lifespan. We actually then don't have time. How many times have you come across people who have worked or heard about, and they've worked up till the day that, they retire, and all of a sudden they get sick. And they have all these plans for, these are all these wonderful things that I'm going to do in the future, but then don't have that opportunity. Or I'll change my exercise next week. Or next month.
Yeah.
My, often the things we have to do, we put off last, are the things that maybe sometimes we have to flip around the other way and go, I will feel so much better if I implement this one thing. And that's going to carry me through all of those other things that need to happen throughout the day.
I would have to say there's probably a universal trend of that habitual thought pattern, right? Of just putting all the things that we would actually need last, and it's just so much easier and readily available to do all the quick fixes and short-term gains and Yeah, that's just what's actually socially encouraged and accepted almost, you know. Yeah.
Or not taking, sometimes I think too, people have difficulty filtering between, is this a good and reliable source of information? And there's a lot of confusion about the information about what people could or should be doing as well.
Yeah, of course.
So part of what we're trying to do is provide clarity and make it easier to create a path to be able to implement life and health style advice. Health style, not well-being or lifestyle. Health style, it's a new word I've just coined. So we're going to start with 3 exercises this morning. All of these after the webinar, you should be able to do these in 4 minutes or less at home. So hopefully this is going to help you to be able to provide a way, something practical that you can include in your day that becomes a normal part of what you do that can support you during this time. Now we have a video. This is the video that Clem produced for us earlier. And we know it's Saturday morning and people might need some help to get moving. So we thought it might be good to get physically moving for a few minutes. Everyone's been sitting down for the webinar for a little while now. So what I'm going to do, Clem's going to talk us through. We will need someone to let us know that you can hear the sound.
Yeah, so please give us feedback.
So we're going to go through 4 different exercises. I'll show you all 4 of them first, and then we'll put some music on and let's do 4 minutes together. So the first exercise is going to be a squat. These are your different options. So you want to keep your feet hip distance apart so that your knees are in line with your hips and feet. And when you come down into the squat, you really want to drive with the bottom. So you're putting your bottom out, sort of like sitting down to sit on a chair and coming back up. When you come down, we want to avoid the knees going past the toes. So they can go past the ankles, but not past the toes. So just keep that in mind. Keep your eyes down to make sure that that's happening. And then when you come back up, you really want to sort of squeeze the butt cheeks to sort of straighten the legs and then start again. Okay? So that's the first option for the squat. If that's not working for you, you've got a little bit of pain in the knees, which is quite common. You can use a chair behind you to just guide the movement for you. Guide the up and the down for you. Okay? So you can do the movement with your hands, and you can keep them straight, whatever feels better. The other option is to do it against the wall. The wall, because it's nice and straight, will give you a little bit of help and support and guidance as you come down and up. So the same thing with the wall squat. You want to avoid the knees going past your toes. That just loads the knee a little bit too much. So those are your options for the squats. If you can't do either of those, you can just march from spot. That's going to get your heart rate up just as much as the other ones. Okay. The other exercises, we're going to do a side lunge. So the lunge to the side, you're going to, again, guide the movement with your body, almost like you're reaching down into this leg that bends, okay? With the opposite leg, you can't see that quick, but those toes are dragging up. Those toes are dragging up. I'm sort of digging my heel into the ground, okay? So here again with the hands, you can keep them on your waist. You can do front, or you can clasp your hands. Okay. The next 2 exercises, we're going to focus on the upper body. So the first one, arm abductions. We're going to go straight up, reaching the back of your hands together. And here you really want to keep your arms behind your head. So avoiding the front. Okay, that's a little bit too easy. Although if you're having issues with your shoulders and that feels more comfortable, feel free to do that. Otherwise, let's aim for behind your head. Okay? The 4th exercise is just a shoulder press. Okay? So we're going to be repeating those exercises quite rapidly on some music and let's get started.
I'm gonna do it with you, everyone.
So let's start with the squats. Big fitness to start. Dominic Mounting. You can go a little bit faster if you like. Good, one more. Use our arms, use our abduction. Yeah. If that's not feeling right, feel free to do chicken legs. So you're still using good rotation. Good. Moving on to your side lunges. Making sure that the leg that's driving is not going past the toes as well. And then your bottom is driving through them. Good. Back down. Shoulder press. Do a few more on the front. Let's get you back to doing the squats. Just starting to burn after those two. Coming back to your shoulder abduction. Definitely tired. We're all together. Good. That's your side lunges. If you're starting to fatigue, you're noticing weakness, which I am. Just go for a squat down. Keep it a little bit higher. That'll still get your heart rate up. And we'll get some good technique. Alright. Back down. Shoulders. 5 to go. Good. Back to your squats. Good. Back to your shoulders. If you're fatiguing like I am, good. Back to your side lunges. Everyone's here, guys. Are you all fired up? Good. Last set of shoulder press, nearly done. Good. Coming down, shoulder press. Woo. All right. Go. I'll start the music. How about you enjoy that?
Well done.
Hey. Thanks, Clem.
Well done.
Everyone participated with us.
If it's telling me I have wicked quads. Thank you. Unfortunately, it doesn't directly correlate to how fit I am, but I'm working on that.
We're all a work in progress.
Exactly.
I really like this quote by Bill Phillips. He said, "Food is the most abused anxiety drug, and exercise is the most potent and underutilized antidepressant." And what the research shows us is that you actually don't have to exercise for very long in order to really have a very positive impact on our internal body physiology. And so even in 4 minutes, obviously you can change your heart rate, you can get your brain switched off and more into your body, changing your breathing patterns, changing your movement. And that's certainly, particularly with high intensity training, that we get changes to different biochemicals even within that period of time. There's something called nitric oxide, which really helps to open all of our blood vessels, which is really positive to increase the nutrition going to different parts of our body. Nonetheless, we would still encourage you to probably exercise a little bit more than 4 minutes a day, but it's a great place to start. So if you can't do, if you're like, I don't have time, you're now only in 4 minutes, okay? You start there. And so we're kind of changing tact. So we've got you really moving and energized. And now what we're going to do is, it's an opportunity now that we're probably taking some deep breaths to really start to feel what that sensation of breathing feels like. So what I'm going to get you to do is just observe how you're already breathing. You can close your eyes if you like. Just see what else you're aware of. Maybe you can get a sense of your heartbeat. Maybe you have a sense of heat. Or thirst. Maybe you have the sense of small beading of perspiration on your brow. And whatever your body tells you, just tell it that it's okay. And see if anything else comes to your awareness. From here, I'm going to ask you to pop your hands on your lower rib area. And we're just going to breathe into our hands. And as we do that, as we breathe in, our tummy should expand. And as we breathe out, we should gently draw in towards our spine. We're just going to see if we can allow ourselves to slow our breathing down slightly. And just counting your natural rhythm of how long you breathe in. And then as we breathe out, we're just going to ask that you breathe out for an extra 1 to 2 seconds. So we're not going to hold the breath. We're going to breathe continuously and slowly. And see if we can continue to slow down the breath. So if you were breathing in for 3 seconds, and we'll try and breathe in for 4 for the next one, and out for 5 or 6. Just see if anything else comes to your awareness. Maybe you notice that you feel a little bit tight somewhere. So as you breathe out, just see if you can start to find a way where you can slightly let that go. Maybe it's through dropping of the shoulders. Maybe you're clenching your face a little bit and can let that go. Or of the buttocks, the jaw, or into the toes. We're just going to take 2 more breaths. Slowly in. And all the way out, just emptying. Last one, breathing in. And then as you breathe out, we're going to sigh. And if you've closed your eyes, we're just going to reopen nice and slowly and come back into the room. So sometimes, just through paying some attention, having some awareness, having a little bit of space to listen to our internal body, not only can we help to calm down our system, but we can start to ease up maybe some tension that we're holding on to. Maybe we can make some small adjustments and recognize that we have the capacity to let that go. Now, sometimes what you feel may not be physical. It's possible that an emotional experience or feeling may arise. And if that happens for you, that's okay. It's just an opportunity to feel into the sensation and then see if you sit with it for a minute or two, it may well start to shift or change. Or maybe you'll notice that you're starting to tense up a particular area of your body, or that you're starting to breathe a little bit differently. And that in turn can help you to have some awareness when you come to particular challenges in certain parts of your day of how you may be having a physical response to what's happening, which then is going to give you the space to be able to find ease. Clem, is there anything you would like to add?
I'm just reading Yvette's question. She asked, do you have any knowledge or information to share about people who don't get a boost of or run as high from exercise? She said, I also have fibromyalgia, so maybe that's the reason I get the pain that lasts longer than the delayed muscle soreness and fatigue from exercise, even though it's gentle and modified for me. So she said she doesn't get the boost from exercise, whereas her housemate gets euphoric and the clear head, anxiety reduction, and it gives her incentive to want to exercise more often. So for Yvette, she's saying she needs intense exercise to feel that incentive, and has always had this issue.
Sure. Well, certainly if we have some physical challenges that might impact our ability to be able to exercise at a higher intensity, we're not going to get the same level of endorphins or body chemicals that lead people to having that kind of euphoric type of sensation. So that potentially may be part of what's happening. certainly there's different stages in regards to the fitness journey, and that most people, when they start exercising, don't experience euphoria. It's something that tends to come once we have a certain level of body fitness as well. And that certainly in regards to delayed onset muscle soreness, I mean, there's certainly some different components that relate into people who get differences in what we call DOMS. Sometimes for some people it can relate to hydration. If you're not well hydrated or you're low in salts or other electrolytes, that can increase your post-exercise soreness. If you're more fatigued, that also can have an impact. If you're not very flexible, but also genetics. So less than 2% of the population have this, but some people can't process some of the chemicals that are produced by exercise very quickly, and that too can mean that people can actually get delayed onset muscle soreness for over a week, but that tends to ease over time as people get fitter. I hope that answers your question. There are certain things that we could do to implement to try and ease that, but probably that's something that we could take offline.
So sorry, I read Yvette's part of her question wrong. She said that for her housemate, she needs intense exercise to feel that incentive, but Yvette herself hasn't been able to do the intense exercise, so she's wondering maybe that's what it would take for her to feel those benefits. Do you think?
Well, probably in regards to the endorphin rush, probably yes, but the amount of intensity that's going to be appropriate for you if you have other physical challenges occurring, you know, might outweigh, you know, if you cause yourself, you need to work yourself up to that point. You can't just suddenly introduce high intensity exercise and necessarily expect that you're going to have the endorphin rush either. So, because it's something that usually develops over time. So what I would say is that keep progressing with your exercise, and that as a maximum, what we would recommend is, the absolute maximum we would recommend is increasing your general exercise program by 10% a week.
There's also another question from Linda. She says, I feel great when I make changes, but I always seem to go back to bad habits. How to break this cycle?
There's quite a bit of research in regards to habits, and what we do know is that it takes people different amounts of time in order to actually implement a long-term habit. And this is one of the challenges, is that people often lose momentum before they hit that, I guess, critical point that it's just a normal part of your daily routine. And the thing that I think about is that you just, like, there is an element of, is it in line with your values? If you know your why it's important to you, that you want to make this change not just for today or tomorrow, but for the long term, and we're not focusing on a short-term goal or number. So if the change is unsustainable, so I'm going to use crash dieting as an example, only because it's so common. If you're implementing something because you want to see a short-term change, i.e. you want to lose 5 kilos in 5 weeks, chances are the things that you're going to be implementing in order to make that change may not be sustainable for the long term. So that's one element. And so, but that's not the only element. And that if we really, like, and I think too, people have a bit of a tendency when we talk about going into your why and your values. I did this with a patient recently who I adore, and you know, she tells me that she wants to lose weight, and we've discussed different strategies around that. And I said, I really want you to dig into why this is important to you. And she said, because I want to fit into my tops. And I said, do you have an emotional response by thinking about not fitting into this particular item of clothing or, you know, your clothes? And she was like, no. And I said, well, I don't think you've dug deep enough. So if you're not emotionally invested, like it has to be like, this is something that I know that I need, because it's going to have a massive impact on the quality of my life, and it has to have attributive meaning. It can't be, I might die of lung cancer one day, so I have to give up smoking. We know that doesn't work. It's logical and it's rational, but we don't necessarily have an emotional attachment to that, unless, for example, sometimes if people, if you have someone close to you that maybe has that same issue and you can relate into their experience, sometimes that can be an emotional experience for you, but often it isn't. But I would also say that if you're falling back into old habits because of your unconscious patterning that says, I don't deserve to be healthy, I don't deserve to feel, I don't feel comfortable in my body, and no matter how much weight I lose, I'm never going to feel comfortable anyway. If that's the underlying messaging that's taking place, then thinking about that self-talk, then chances are you're going to go, well, I'm never going to achieve the result anyway. I'm just going to go back to doing what I was doing before. So there are different underlying drivers, but that's why I think digging into your values and really sitting with your why is important. And that will tell you a little bit more about how you can do that with us next week. I hope that answers your question. If we look at philosophers, musicians, artists, and even our own language development, we talk about being warm-hearted, cold-hearted, torn between your head and your heart, and that inherently we know that our heart center and our heart field has a really important impact on how we feel and our relationship with the world. And science now is telling us that our heart actually sends more information to our brain than our brain sends to our heart. And so our heart is giving information and feedback to the brain, which it then processes. But as a part of that process, our heart has a massive electrical conduction and produces an electromagnetic field. And so, we know that electrical conduction is very, very fast. And so this information transfer happens very, very quickly. And what we know is that people who feel into their body and engage with their emotional selves have the capacity to be able to actually change this messaging that can be shown through scientific, they put ECG markers on people so they can see people's heart rate and their heart wave, so the quality of the rhythm, that people can change this within minutes. And so the next exercise that we're going to do is partly you can adopt what we're just doing in that previous breathing exercise and then feeling into your body, and you can make a change. But also we can use the next tool as a way to also get into that that flow state where we can have an impact on this and make a change to how we feel, which then in turn tells our brain information about how to think. So we know that you can't outthink a bad feeling. Okay, so sometimes you actually have to sit with the feeling, the emotional self, because that impacts our rational thought process. So often people think it's the other way around, that decision making is a rational thing, or it should be a rational decision, but more often than not, it has shown to be the other way around. So what I'm going to ask you to do, hopefully you've got a pen and paper nearby, and if you don't, you're welcome to pop this into the chat box. Now, I'm sorry we have gone slightly over time this morning, but what I'm going to ask you to do is just for 2 minutes, so this is the third exercise, so we're nearly there, is we're going to ask you to write down things that you're thankful for. People go, oh, I've done this before, I did that once. What we know is that people who do it on a day-to-day basis for a minimum of 5 days start to actually psychologically change how they process and they think and the quality of how they feel. So let's get started and start writing down some things that we're thankful for, grateful for. They can be big things, they can be little things. It might be that you have shoes, or the particular people in your life, or that you don't have the coronavirus, or maybe you're thankful for the different measures our government has put into place. It can be all kinds of different things. Maybe it's because it's sunshine that's coming through the windows onto my face this morning, which is really lovely. That always makes me feel, just changes how I feel almost instantaneously, particularly on those dark, cloudy days. I always remind myself that when you go into an aeroplane and get above the clouds, that it's always sunny. And it's like that we have a little blanket on. And that for me helps my inner state around it being cloudy for days and days and days on end. Okay, and I can sit with that feeling of what does it feel like to be in an aircraft and look out the window and seeing the sun in the morning, and how much that kind of impacts my feeling of well-being and how much I really enjoy that experience. So that helps me circumnavigate when I might be, struggling with a particular thing. So another 30 seconds to write down things that we're grateful for this morning. And then what I'm going to ask you to do is just to sit with for a moment. Why are you thankful for those particular things? How does it impact the quality of your life? And then what I'm going to ask you to do is to just tune back in to your body's feeling of sensation again, and ask you to feel what that feels like in your body, to be grateful, to be thankful, to have appreciation. And see if that changes the quality of how we feel. Now, if you're struggling with that at all, just come back to the breathing and become aware of that. Feel the sensation in your body and allow whatever comes to you to be there. And then we can ask ourselves again, what does it feel like, that amazing impact, that thing we're grateful for, be it a person, an object, a social group, or a community. How does that make us feel? inevitably I always smile doing this particular exercise. And then I sort of feel like I'm smiling with my whole body. I feel like my collarbones are smiling. All my cells are smiling. And sometimes I even get this sense of almost like glowing light coming out of my heart. And just slowly coming back to us, back into the room, back into the space, back into our beautiful group this morning. And I want to remind you that you can access this space in yourself at any time. This is always there. It's always a constant. And it's something that can be useful to help to shift our body awareness, as well as our mindset, as well as our physiology. So our heart rate changes, our breathing will change, and then that field around us starts to change as well in association with this. So I'd love to hear in the chat box how people are feeling right now. But as that comes through, what we'll talk about is the difference between values or motivation. If something's in line with your values, often you don't need motivation because you embody it as a part of who you are, which tends to make it a lot easier in order to maintain something for the long term. And this is the same for habits and goals. It's useful to have goals, it's useful to have something to work towards, but in order to achieve that and then maintain it, it's what we do every day or most days that's going to have the biggest impact in regards to our long-term outcomes. This is actually me on the beach in the morning on the Gold Coast with the sunrise in the morning, which is my favorite time of day. And that's a habit of mine, to be up early. So it's worth just thinking about where to from here. Well, certainly you can continue on with these exercises and we'd love to hear your feedback. You know, send us an email and let us know how you've gone afterwards if you were able to implement any of these exercises and start a new habit. You know, you might just pick one that feels like the right thing for you to be doing right now. You don't have to do all of them all the time. You're more likely to maintain a change if you pick one thing. But we've got a big week ahead at Koru, and it's our birthday next week. And as a part of that, we're going to do a free 3-part workshop, and we're going to send videos directly to your email. And the first one is going to be diving further into more your why and to your values to help try and support you on why this is important, that you have an opportunity to go from where you are now to where you want to be. And why is that important? So the more that we're able to engage into that process, the more that we're going to be able to see why we should make time for it. Why is it a priority in our lives? Okay, so watch out for that. It will be released on Tuesday morning. We've got some other exciting things happening at Koru at the moment. And one of those is that this is not available right now. Okay, but we're starting something called Wellness Co. And it's going to be an online program to support people with those 5 different areas that I talked about earlier: mindset, body awareness, nutrition, movement, and relationships, in order to make long-term change that's within your own values and your own goals, but we'll be along the journey with you every step of the way. Now we're going to have a little bit more information coming out about that in the next week or so. Like I said, it's not currently available, you currently can't join, but what I will just show you for literally 1 minute is that this is inside the back end of our learning portal.
And so what I'm going to show you what it would first be like if you were inside the portal. So the very first time after you emailed you log in, you access, this is the screen that would be right in front of you. As you can see, there's a welcome video there explaining what to do next. Now, as you can see here, if we come across, that basically there's going to be information under each of these different sections. So all you would have to do is literally click on to the next one down and you would find the content that's right for you. Now I've got most of these closed off right now, but for example, I've just got one in here. So you have some information, and again, just like the introduction section, we can put a video down below for you. But I hope that gives you a sense of how easy it is to use and what it would be like to come inside the portal. And I hope that you consider joining Wellness Co. I think it's going to be a really amazing experience and way.
So we just wanted to let you know that we have something exciting coming and that we're really looking forward to it. And I feel like this is the biggest, most exciting thing that we've done at Cotteru since we've opened. But in the meantime, we'd love to hear what is your top takeaway from this morning and about how you can embrace change. Think about how the caterpillar sometimes goes into the cocoon and we have to have rest and nurturing for a little while, and then we can come out as a beautiful butterfly. What was your top takeaway this morning? Oh, we've got some beautiful feedback this morning about feeling empowered. I love that. Feeling joyful. I'm just really appreciative that everyone's here this morning with us. I've really enjoyed it. And I hope everyone's got something out of it. Do you feel like you can implement what we've introduced this morning? Change fatigue is a top takeaway. Keep making small changes. That's right. That is so important. Well, need to feel emotions and changing from how you want to achieve goals. That's absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. So as always, you can get ongoing support with us face-to-face, or particularly with Clem at the moment, online. If you haven't had an online appointment, there's so many things that we can do with you in those sessions. It's actually almost blows me away that the changes that we've made to really help online appointments function really well at Cotteru. You've got an online appointment fairly soon this morning, don't you, Clem?
I do.
Yeah, so we better help you get on your way and everyone else to enjoy their weekend. But if anyone else wants to get in touch with us, these are all the different places that you can find us. And we hope you enjoy this morning. We'll just double check there aren't any last minute questions, and we'll leave you on your day.
Oh, Vivian might be asking a question.
Is she typing? Is it saying she's typing in the chat box?
I think it was a typo, but hopefully trying to, motivation.
Motivation, that's what she got.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And hopefully we can transfer motivation next week with the videos into values and why. So then you won't be so reliant on motivation in order to keep some momentum going. So once you get going, it's usually easier to keep kind of going on the path. Well, we'll leave it all there. Have a great weekend. As always, we welcome your feedback. Contact us anytime. We love hearing from you, even if it's just to say hi. If you have some constructive feedback about this morning, we'd love to hear that as well, because what we want to do is provide more resources for you that you find useful and valuable. But take care for now. Catch you later.
Bye.
Bye.